if anything, I'll probably fall asleep.
That's all we need. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host Alex, and with me I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, look, I'm all right. Managing a couple of projects in a minute, but yeah, look, I'm not too bad, despite what was a pretty disappointing last-minute defeat.
Yeah, look, it's certainly an interesting game to sink our teeth into. I think there's been a little bit of backlash potentially from the supporter base, which I suppose it's probably been building for a couple of weeks now. So it's not necessarily just a pure reaction to this fixture, but I was sort of talking to Logan about the fact last week that it's now 1 win in 7 games, quite a handful of draws in there, only a couple of losses, but you can see a sort of frustration or tension sort of building amongst supporters in terms of when this set of results will turn and things will start going in our favour. And I mean, at least personally, from my point of view, I look at it as not so much a poor performance and a frustration from that perspective, but actually frustration because the performances have actually been quite good. And the fact that we're not turning those performances into wins is probably the most frustrating element, I suspect.
Yeah, I think realistically, from my point of view, the biggest frustration is just a lack of cutting edge, and it's been something that's frustrated us for most games this season. Where we've had a few really clear opportunities that we should have been able to convert and capitalise. And if we do, I think that first half, especially against Saints, we dominated, and if we'd have been able to put there was, I think, at least 2 really great opportunities where we were 6 yards out with the ball. And if we put those away, I think we win that comfortably. But we just seem to be really struggling just to either get the shot away or pick the right pass in that final third at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Liam's pretty frustrated as well, and I suppose it's actually his namesake. It was pretty frustrating a couple of times. It's a nice segue there. I mean, even just looking back on the highlights before we hit record, just to sort of refresh myself on some of the opportunities that we'd had. But you look back in that first half, and I guess there's frustrations from 2 different elements. I mean, Philogene and a few other players certainly in the second half dropped off markedly from what we saw in that first half. But in that first half, guys like Philogene, I mean, there's a passage of play where he takes that beautiful touch, gets around his man, plays the ball through for Delap, and Taylor Bellis, I think, slips over on the grass to play Delap in. And Delap takes about 3 or 4 touches to set himself up before taking a shot. And I think it's situations like that where it seems as if our players are just overthinking things. I don't know if it's the home form, it's the home pressure, anything like that that's really getting to them, or it's just nerves, I suppose. But, there's a number of occasions like that. And again, we saw it in the second half with Delap as well, where it seems as if players just aren't pulling the trigger in the right moments. You see Vinagre taking shots when it should be a cross into the box, things like that, where it's hard to, and I've seen there's been plenty of criticism for Rosenior after the game. It's hard to put the blame necessarily on Rosenior for that sort of thing when it seems so clearly to be more an issue with decision-making from the players, or even just a bit of bad luck as well. And it's hard to look at the fixtures and say, oh, it's all just down to bad luck. But it does feel as if when you look at things like the balance of play in that first half, when we can go toe-to-toe with a relegated side like that surely the results are going to turn our way, or they should be turning our way if we can sort of put those sorts of performance out more consistently.
Yeah, certainly. In regards to, I think, Liam and Delap and Philogene and Vinagre and something, I think that it's not a full defence, but I think a partial defence is how young and inexperienced some of these guys are to top level football, because I think with I think it was a bit of indecision. He got in there and he wasn't sure whether he wanted to put it on his left or on his right, and he sort of half made a decision and then went, no, I think that was the wrong one, and went the other way. Whereas, someone more experienced just takes that touch and I think fine, takes a shot early and gets before they even get themselves into trouble. And I think, these guys are only going to get better. And that's, I know we've been saying, and I mean, realistically, to talk about the club is that, this is part of a process. This is part of a, long-term, building of a club and system, and, building up of players as well. So I think, I think that it's easy to lose sight of that in, the excitement of being, in the top 4 and the top 6 for the first section of the season. And it's easy to dismiss that when now we've slipped out of that and the results are going against us. But I think that's something that's worth, just ruminating on a little bit, that realistically going into the season, who thought we were going to be competing for, competing for playoffs or sitting, in and around, top few teams, beating or going to toe-to-toe with the teams that came down from the Prem. Who honestly can, hand on heart, stand here and say, yep, that's what I predicted? Because I know I certainly wasn't one. I thought we'd go okay. I think realistically right now we're sitting where I sort of thought we would sit. We'd be mid-table, upper mid, within touching distance of playoffs. And, if we can get, a couple of results go, our way, we get a bit of form, then we're right back in the mix. And I think that's sort of where realistically our trajectory is going to be. I think we're going to battle away this year and we might make the playoffs, but I don't think we're going to get out of it. And then, it's one of next season, then again, we go again and we're hopefully that little bit better, that little bit stronger, that little bit smarter to push it, to make a real tilt for it. And it's that the football mentality of wanting, I guess all the balance of, results now versus the long-term stability. Because I think even if we got all the results right now and we went up to the Prem, I don't think the squad's in a strong enough position to maintain that. We'll yo-yo again, potentially. But in terms of, who's to blame for the results and things, I think because, as you alluded to, the performances themselves, the manner of the defeats aren't damning in terms of Liam Rosenior. I don't think they're woeful, dreadful performances. There are people out there who are suggesting that these are, terrible performances. I think they're inconsistent across 90 minutes and across, match weeks, but I think there's enough really positive play in what we're doing. And I think, for the most part, even though there was 2 moments in the second half where Allsop played to Tyler Morton and it looked real scary, for the most part, playing out from the back is not creating any major errors.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because that was a big criticism over pre-season.
Yeah, and I think, but again, that is not the system, that's decision-making. Right? Because in that moment, and I think it was good to see, again, I think we talked a couple of weeks ago about Connolly ripping into Seri about, making a mistake in a dangerous position. I think here also plays it to Morton. They escape and Morton goes up and says, why the heck, why did you give me the ball there? That's not the place to give it to him. So it's good that, they are, they're holding each other to account. But I think, it's a bit of a, I think the way that when we break, when it works and we break forward and we do, like the first half showed, we were going at them, at pace, creating great opportunities, creating holes, with some nice short passes, some nice, switches, some longer balls. I think we have all the tools at our disposal. It's just we're just not quite putting it all the pieces together at the moment. And if we don't sort it soon, then I think it starts to become alarming, because if we don't start to pick up, I think realistically some wins in the next few games is going to be important, and we start sliding, then it will be a little bit concerning.
But I think one positive though, and because we'll look ahead to the following games in a bit, because I do want to talk about that, given how strong our fixture run is. But at least just on this game, everyone sort of well, one of the big criticisms I see of Rosenior is, well, he's so stubborn, he's so set on his system and his way of playing, and this is the way we've got to play, and he never makes change. They're very critical about how self-assured he is and how he doesn't see the issues. But then you look at this game and you look at the fact that we started with two natural wingers in Lakilo and Philogene out on the wings with Delap through the middle as something that we haven't really seen at all this season. We've usually had someone like a Slater or a Traore out on one of the wings, or Delap even has played out on the wing at times. And so the fact that he's actually changing the structure, and I thought it worked really well in that first half. I thought it was really effective having Lakilo and Philogene on those wings running at the fullbacks for Southampton. And it shows that Rosenior is actually still moulding his team, still tweaking and changing the system. Maybe it's on a case-by-case basis. Maybe it's because Southampton have such damaging fullbacks, so you want to sort of press them back. And I thought in the first half especially, it worked really well. The goal notwithstanding coming from Walker-Peters cross in. But, I think that particular criticism of Rosenior is quite unfair when you look at the way we are changing our structure and trying new things. And granted, Lakilo, I think, went off with a knock. Hopefully he's fit to start midweek, but I'd love to see them run out in the same formation again.
Yeah, certainly. I think, it's easy to say, armchair critic can say, oh, well, we need to be more tactically adaptable and we need to do this and that. And I mean, it is true that you do need to be able to adapt to your opponents to an extent, but also the key is if you play your system and you play it well, then it doesn't really matter who the opponent is, because if you've got the ball and you're scoring goals, then who bloody cares? And so I think to an extent, I think Liam Rosenior's goal really is let's just perfect what we got. Let's get this working, and I think, I mean, I'm a fan. I like it. There are certainly, I think we see lots of aspects of naivety with other players in this system, and that's not just from the young players as well. I think this year Seri's shown some naivety, particularly in quite a few games. But I actually thought Southampton was one of his better performances in a little while. But I think, if you spend too much time working on too many sets of tactics, going, okay, well, we've got this team this weekend, so we're going to go into 4-4-2 this weekend, and we're going to work on it. Then, what the players don't really have that sense of, stability and clear understanding of what their role is, because it's changing every week. So I think it's a bit silly to be suggesting that we change tactics too much to suit the suit our opposition. But I think you're right, in saying that Rosenior is not. It's not like he's just putting the same 11 out every game and holding his head in his hands, going, well, I don't know what to do. He is adjusting. He is tweaking the way we're playing, the way we're approaching games. The roles of those players and the positions are changing and evolving as the season progresses. So I think, I'm pretty happy. I mean, I'm disappointed with some of the results, because I think there are draws that definitely should have been wins. I think on the weekend, at the worst case, that should have been a draw for us, but realistically, probably also should have been a win due to all those drop chances. So, there's certainly frustration there, but I think overwhelmingly, I have fairly positive vibe about what's going on at the club.
Yeah, well, let's do our votes now, and we can talk about some of the other players as we give those before we move on. I'm just conscious we've already got a lot to talk about in that game, but there's plenty more to chat about as we go through. But I'll start with my votes, and I found it hard to go past Allsop for the 3 votes. Made some terrific saves. There was one that came to mind. I think it was a deflection off Morden in the first half, where it turned it from sort of a routine save into a sort of fingertip effort from him to tip it over the crossbar, and made a few terrific saves in the second half as well. So, I thought he was easily man of the match for myself. I gave the 2 votes to Delap. I think obviously scored the goal, created a number of great chances. I don't want to heap too much pressure on him. I think I made the comparison in the Facebook group that his movement reminds me a lot of Harry Kane, not necessarily the goal scoring at the moment. Hopefully that does come. But just in terms of for his size, his agility, and there was a ball that I think Philogene might have played through to him, or Morton might have played through to him, where it looked like it was sort of to his feet, but awkward height for him or whatever, and he just sort of got his foot to it and took control of it and wrapped it around the defender and got himself in on goal. I think it was maybe his chance in the second half where he took a few step overs when he should have just had a quicker shot. But sort of, that sort of coordination and agility at his height and sort of, posture is really exciting to see. And I think it's the sort of thing where if he bags, a hat trick in a game against a Rotherham or someone, it could really signal like a, opening of the floodgates for him in terms of the goal scoring side of things. But, even barring that, I think his all-round play is terrific for us. So, he got the 2 votes for me and 1 vote for Philogene. I think certainly, as I sort of said before, I think his second half dropped off a lot and so did a lot of players. So I don't know if that was fitness or effort or Southampton just getting on top. I'm not quite sure, but some of his play in the first half, just like Millwall the week before, I think he is head and shoulders our most technically gifted player. And, at times that's actually probably a detriment because I think sometimes the other players just think, oh, he can do it all himself. And they could sort of almost get lost in watching him play and stop and watch. And I shared a link in the chat just before about, I think his second half, he's sort of tearing down a wing and then he stops and looks up and there's no one alongside him because everyone's sort of just jogging around because I think they're just assuming he's going to do it all himself. But, it was a terrific display from him in patches and hopefully he can, thread a 90 minutes together and tear a game apart. But that's a very long-winded three players for me. But how about you?
I'll try and keep mine a bit quicker and shorter. I'm going to also go 3 to Allsop. I think you're right. Spot on the money there. Some amazing saves, some really good work. Despite a couple of nervy moments with the playing out from the back, deservedly, I think kept us in the game when we should have already had the game to bed. 2 points. I'm going to go to Philogene because I think, as you said, our most dangerous player. Realistically, with I think a couple of amazing touches, particularly one down the left channel where he touched and flicked it over the player, and then took a touch, and then and I think in the second half we were flagging that run, that even though had no support, was one who was still trying to drive the team forward for when he had the opportunity. So 2 points there. I'm actually going to 1 point to Lakilo, who I thought, as we alluded to earlier, had a really positive impact on the way that we started the game and on our play in that first half particularly. So, also Philogene and Lakilo. And poor Delap, this is out.
Good shout. Well, one player who came on in the second half who we'll chat about briefly now as our player of the week to review was Ali Said-Manesh, who, we haven't actually seen as much of as I guess we were expecting to when he first joined the club. Only the 33 league appearances I saw when I was looking up his stats, which it really does surprise when you consider that this is his second full season here, having had the loan spell prior to that as well, which I'm including in those league appearance numbers. Scored 3 goals in that time, joined in 2022 from Fenerbahce, and then permanent signing that summer as well. Number of hamstring injuries are really what's undercut his spell with us so far, which is really disappointing because he was essentially the predecessor to Tufan in the sense of being that exciting player coming in from the Turkish leagues, 2.5 million, 3 million or something I think we spent on him. So a lot of hype, a lot of promise, but unfortunately doesn't really seem to have lived up to it, through a combination of injuries and form, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. A player that when we first signed and I watched some of the highlights, I remember being not so thrilled. He didn't look like the reports were this player with electric pace and amazing footwork and skills, and I must have been watching the wrong footage or something of him because he didn't look that electric in some of the highlights packages that I was watching. But I think certainly, particularly last season, I think showed in patches how potentially dangerous he could be, but also showed, potentially the start of, the injury-prone tag getting attached to his name. It's a weird one. I feel like it feels like we barely seen him play, for the amount of time he's been here. And I think obviously that's due to, I think, 2 big long-term stints last season that he was out. But probably not really one that you would count as a success for the amount of money that we spent. But it was good to see him get on the park, and I think showed some promise, showed some energy, tried to ignite some stuff, late in the second half. But yeah, probably a little bit disappointing for the amount of money we've spent.
Is he one that you'd be potentially looking at? I mean, obviously with FFP causing issues and everything like that, whether we look to sell him in the summer to just raise some funds, maybe in that same group as like a Cynic and those guys who potentially haven't worked out, but back in Turkey or another European nation might get a half decent fee.
Yeah, I think certainly like the intent that we showed by signing like Philogene, for example, shows, I think, is sort of an indication of sort of what we want to be able to achieve, the quality of player that we want to try and attract. And I think, unfortunately for Ali, he doesn't quite, at this stage, doesn't quite meet that sort of caliber unless he has an epiphany, a transformation this season, and bags 10 goals in the second half of the season or something. Then I just don't necessarily see a long-term future with Hull City for him, and that's not because I don't like him. I think he's very exciting and all action sort of player, but I think there's enough. I think there's not enough maybe like football smarts that go along with, because I remember like particularly last season, lots of really silly, dangerous tackles and challenges and things like that, where he was just letting the emotion or his that the all action style, I suppose, like get the better of it, and so lots of free kicks given away in a defensive third and things like that, where you go, it's just a silly place to do those sorts of things. But
well, yeah. Hopefully he can turn things. Hopefully, if you can stay fit and get on the park a bit, we're talking about having those sort of wider players up supporting Delap, and I think Ali can fit into that mold as well. Whether it's through the middle or out wide, I think he's got that burst of pace that could really help us over the coming weeks. But we use that as a nice segue to talk about these games we've got coming over the next 7 days, which is first of all Birmingham this Thursday morning up against Mr. Wayne Rooney, having taken charge of Birmingham over the international break. Obviously, the former manager of Derby County when Rosenior was assistant manager there. So there'll be a bit of a headline made between those two, which would be quite interesting to see. A bit of a reasonably controversial appointment, given the fact that Eustace had Birmingham in the top 6, and Rooney's now come out and lost his first game in charge. I think they had 5 shots on target. The owners said they wanted Rooney because they wanted someone who would take the handbrake off and play that sort of risk-free football. Not risk-free. That's what he's doing. Taking more risks and not being afraid to take the game on. And I think I saw that he went from a front 3 that Eustace had set up to dropping a man extra into midfield. So I don't know if that's quite the risky sort of football style that the owners necessarily wanted. And we've only lost 1 game in our last 5 against Birmingham, which is a reasonably strong record. And as I say, they're sort of in mixed form. They've got 2 wins in their last 5, both of which came under Eustace before his sacking. So it's an interesting and a good time, I suspect, to take on Birmingham, with Rooney still getting to grips on his squad and his style that he wants to implement. So it's an interesting one. I hate to say it, but I'm almost like this is almost more a must not lose game to me rather than a must win. It's more like if we lose, this would be awful. Because, as we say, it's the 1 win in 7, and it's sort of the growing pressure. And if it was 2 losses in a row, it starts to feel pretty bad. But at least if we can get a draw in this one ahead of Preston at home on the weekend, you sort of go, okay, we'll take a point on the road. Rooney is a bit of an enigma. We don't quite know what they're going to offer up, and then we see what we can do at home on the weekend.
I think like these 2 upcoming games are really not like, I don't want to say crucial because we're still so early in the season. We're like approaching a third of the way through, I suppose, though. But they kind of with the relative positions of the three clubs, teams that we are. It almost is. These are almost crucial games that to just to keep that dream alive, to stay within touching distance of top six and those sorts of things. Because I think at the moment we're still, even though we've dropped another couple of places, we're still 2 points out of those 6 or something like that. That I think I think at least 3 points from these 2 fixtures it is a must, and and I think anything less than that, even 2 draws, I think would be a failure across these two games. I just think it doesn't do enough. It's not showing enough, and I know it seems kind of contradictory with what I was saying earlier about the development of the system and results versus performances and things. But I think I just think we are, as you said, we're 1 win in 7. If you go to 1 win in 9, regardless of the amount of draws, it's just not enough for, where we've talked so much previously about how last season was turning losses to draws, and this season is supposed to be about turning draws to wins. It felt like we were on the right track, but I think we've just reverted back to, for the most part, turning losses to draws. And we haven't actually made that step forward. So I think
and my worry as well, I suppose, is you look at these next 10 fixtures and there are a lot of very winnable games. Like we've had probably one of the toughest starts of the season in the league, and then you look ahead and we've got teams like Rotherham, Cardiff, Preston, and I think there's another easy game at home as well over the next 10. And then you've also got QPR and Swansea away, who aren't travelling too well. Watford as well, who aren't travelling too well, are at home as well. Where you think, really, if we were to get 2 or 3 wins in the next 10, that's almost not enough. And that's me saying, I've been as positive on Rosenior as anyone, or you and I both have been. So it's not to say that we want him out or anything like that, but it's hard to start to ignore the results. And the concern as well is if the results don't start to come, is where the players start to question what's going on and performances start to drop off. I think that's the key as well. Like you say, it's not just the results, it's the performances as well. So while the performances are strong, you kind of go, that's good, and we're trending in the right direction. But if we were to not get a win in these next 2 games, or start to drop some of those easier games, that's when the concern can come if the performances start to drop off as well. So I think this really is a crucial period of the season, this lead up to Christmas just about. I mean, we're still only end of October, but it does sort of start to creep up on you quite quickly. But I think that run up to December is going to be a really critical part of the season for us. And, on the basis of the performances so far, you'd think that we're going to get a nice healthy string of wins, but I guess we'll have to keep an eye out and see how it goes. But for this one, specifically for Birmingham, in terms of the lineup, we were sort of talking, quite a positive lineup against Southampton. Lakilo potentially an injury doubt with that knock he got. But, would you look to just sort of keep the same formation if you can?
If we can, I think that seemed to work really well. If Lakilo's fit, I think he should start. I think I was saying it in the chat. The other thing that's concerning me really at the moment is that midfield trio. I'm not sure the balance is quite right. It feels like, with Slater there, old 50-grand Slater always pops up again when he's least expected, either to score a goal or to come into the conversation about the most valuable players in our squad. But his absence has highlighted a very real problem in midfield players that we have at our disposal, and that is essentially, it seems like we've got lots of very technically gifted players, but we're missing that grunt, that workhorse. So we've had someone like Smallwood over, a couple of seasons ago who really highlighted that part of the game. This season and last as well, it's really been Slater as the guy who's doing a lot of the grunt work, who also has been put in a few different positions. But I think Seri, Morton, and Twine, or Seri, Morton, Traore, or they're all the same kind of players. Someone very technical, who wants to get on the ball, but just get on the ball and move it, and then not necessarily, that box to box, who is, or Energizer Bunny, I suppose, because the last one, I guess, before Slater probably was maybe Honeyman as the guy who was all about and willing to drive forward and get involved in attack and drive into the channels and those sorts of things, which doesn't really seem like we get from Twine or from Mort, and certainly not from Seri. They're very much more that slow, they get involved in the methodical build-up, but when we're breaking, which seems to be where most of our more dangerous attacks come from, when we're breaking with pace and they're looking for that guy, popping up on the edge of the 18 as a third, second or third option. None of our currently fit midfielders really seem to be, filling that role that well, and that's my concern with the midfield. But
would you look at starting Doherty? I think he was a name that we floated.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, potentially just for something different. I think Twine had a better game against Southampton in the sense that I don't remember him doing anything particularly bad, but I also don't remember him doing anything particularly good. So, but I think that's kind of where Twine's at the moment. Lots of hype and not a lot of delivery. And Traore is very hit and miss, it feels. He's very inconsistent. Well, he either has a really good and influential game, or he sort of seems to be missing. Although I suppose his couple of goals have come from being that extra man driving into the box from that position behind the striker. So perhaps Traore, but yeah, I think someone like Doherty might be really good as someone just a bit of an engine in the middle.
Yeah, although I was just having a look because we're talking about him. It struck me that Traore didn't come on against Southampton, and it reminded me a bit of, I think I'd said in the podcast last week that I'm not convinced he can play 3 games in a week. I don't know if he's got the legs for it, and we saw it against, I can't remember who it was now, when he did play that sort of midweek game, and he really struggled. So I do wonder if Rosenior was keeping him fresh against Southampton to start against Birmingham potentially. So that would be an interesting change. Potentially. In terms of prediction for this one, how are you feeling heading into it?
Well, look, I keep tipping that we're going to keep a clean sheet and get a 1-0, but I've given up on that now. I don't see that ever happening again. And it's weird because it's not like, you think you're playing out from the back, it's going to be one of those stupid goals that people keep posting in the, they get a footage of some bloody lower league, non-league team playing, passing out from the back, playing into the striker, and then tapping it in. And we're not giving away goals like that. It's those moments of madness where someone doesn't track a runner, or most of the goals we're conceding are coming from open play, and we're not giving them a goal. So, but that frustration is there for me now. I've given up on clean sheets. I just don't know when we're next going to keep one, unless we can come up against a team who's got the worst scoring rate in the division. That's probably where we'll keep a clean sheet.
Oh, probably keep
so
yeah.
2-1 win. I'll go. I think Tufan was a little bit rusty against Southampton when he came on. I think it'd be better for that little bit of time just to. He's been out for a lot longer than it felt like he was going to be when he was first. It's like he's got a knock to his thigh or something, and then. He'll be out for a couple of weeks, and then that couple of weeks stretched to a month. And I don't remember when he last played. It was the 4th or 5th game of the season. So.
Yeah. And it's wild to think as well that our 2 clean sheets have come against Leeds and Leicester, who are probably 2 of our tougher opponents this season. So very difficult to predict. Look, my 1-1 almost came true against Southampton, and I thought I didn't jinx it by not gloating about it with about a minute to go, and sure enough, they managed to score anyway, despite me.
Well, you were thinking about it. That's the problem.
I was thinking about it. Yeah, that's it. I had the message quoted. I was ready to reply to it, and I went, going to delete that. Yeah, look, I'll go with my 1-1 predictions are pretty consistent at the moment. I think we'll get on the score sheet, but yeah, can't see us keeping a clean sheet, so I'll say 1-1 in this one. We'll round things off. We've got Preston at home on the weekend, who, they were sitting 3rd in the table with 6 wins from 7 games, looking absolutely flying to start the season under Ryan Lowe, who I heard today is actually the 3rd longest serving manager in the championship, which I find absolutely wild because he's only been there for about 2 years. But there you go. Frockier, Jensen, Will Keane, Robbie Brady are probably their most attacking players, most dangerous players. And of course, the latter two, as former City players, no doubt will be lining up to get on the score sheet as well. But yeah, no wins in their last 5, which is pretty remarkable given how they started the season. So they're having a similar sort of wobble to us, I would say. And I'd be curious to see what their supporters are saying about Ryan Lowe. And, obviously he's been there a little bit longer, which actually in a way might count against him because he doesn't have the grace of a sort of, let's wait and see while he builds the side. Like he's kind of expected to be getting them going right now. So a bit of pressure on them heading into this one, coming to the MKM where, I didn't actually realize until after the Southampton game when we were talking about it that we've only got the 1 win for the season at home, which was against Sheffield Wednesday. So, that sort of the home struggles have sort of continued this season. We had a lot of them last season as well whenever we had the big sellout crowd. So maybe it is the pressure of the crowd getting to the players, but if ever we need the 3 points at home, I think this is a big one to get the 3 points.
Yeah, I think that home form is something that is fairly concerning. You really do need to be winning at home, or at the very least, collecting your points. But realistically, we should be winning our home games. I think it's one that, like, there's lots of teams. You go, oh, we got whoever it is away. We're going to this stadium. It's always going to be tough there. But I don't think we don't have that. There's not that fear. I don't think of coming to the MKM. Where it's like, Hull City. Well, they're not hard. They're not going to be hard to break down. They're not going to come at us. It's weird. It's like I think we just need wins there, but I unfortunately don't see it coming. I think Preston might break their streak against us. We'll continue our poor home form.
I'm going to go for a confidence sounding 2-0 win for us at home. I really think this is the sort of game that we need to shake the monkey off our back and get going. So we'll see how we go this weekend. But look, thank you for joining me in the meantime, Dan.
That's all right, not a problem.
And thanks everyone for listening in. We'll be back this time next week to chat all things City, as hopefully we've picked up the 2 wins against Birmingham and Preston and really got ourselves back on track for a push for that top 6 place as best we can. But until next time, come on City.